All right, Charlie, it's a pleasure.
Thank you.
I want to walk you through your life, is what I'd like to do. Um, where were you born?
I was born in Lexington, Kentucky.
Did you grow up there?
I grew up there until I was about 18 or 19.
Do you think you still sound like a person from Kentucky? Have you
People tell me I do.
Did you go to preschool?
No. As a matter of fact, I went to kindergarten for, I think, 3 days and told my mother I did not want to go back because I did not like the teacher, and so I did not go back till first grade.
And take me through your school years from there.
Well, I went to elementary school, Jefferson Davis Elementary, because it was still segregation in Kentucky in 1954 when I enrolled in first grade. Then I went to Morton Junior High, which is also in Lexington, and Henry Clay High School, after the statesman Henry Clay from Kentucky in Lexington. I attended UK for several semesters, and I dropped out, and I got drafted. I became 1A, and I was drafted in 1968.
Why did you drop out of UK?
It was 1967, and there were more things to do, I thought, at that time.
But what was on your mind when you dropped out? That's interesting, given that you ended up. If someone had told you when you dropped out that you would have a career in education, what would you have said?
Rubbish.
Yeah.
I would have said I want to go to California and meet women and just be young.
That was what you were going to do? Meet women and be young?
Well, I'd say I was a man without a plan, really. I was day to day.
So you drop out, you become eligible for the draft, you get drafted. How do you respond to that?
I went.
You went.
I was drafted in the Marine Corps in 1968 after the Tet Offensive and after the Pueblo incident, which was a run-in we had with Korea.
Yeah.
And so the nation was on really high alert, and they were taking anyone that they drafted. And the Tet Offensive decimated the Marine Corps, a lot of wounded, a lot of fatalities. So they, for the first time since World War II, they dipped down into the selective service system and took draftees.
So where did they send you?
Camp Pendleton, California.
And you say you went through boot camp.
I did.
How did you find that?
I didn't like it.
It was a long way from going to California.
A long way from hippiedom.
Yeah, it must have had short hair.
I had long hair when I went in.
So after Camp Pendleton, where'd you go?
Well, it was actually MCRD, which is the boot camp. That's in San Diego.
Right.
And then the next stop is Camp Pendleton for advanced infantry training and MOS things.
And from there?
From there, I tried to get out on a hardship discharge, and I was denied. And then I went to cook school, and I tried to get out on a medical discharge, and I was denied. And then they put me in the infantry and gave me advanced infantry training and gave me orders to Vietnam.
Did you go?
No.
What'd you do?
I didn't go.
Where'd you go instead?
Well, I was in Lexington. They gave me a 7-day leave, and then from there I went to Yellow Springs, Ohio, to Antioch College. I had some friends that went to college up there. And in 1969, it was a beautiful, beautiful university, and a lot of like-minded people up there. And I lived there for 3 years, and I met a student who was my girlfriend. And on a work-study program, she came out to the Bay Area to work, and we lived in Oakland for 3 months.
So how come the Marines didn't track you down and pull you back in?
They tried to. They just didn't find me, and I eventually went back in 1974, I believe, when Ford pardoned Nixon. He gave a blanket clemency to resistors and deserters. So I went back and turned myself in, and they gave me 21 months of community service, like a CO job. And I completed that. So I have a clemency discharge from the Marine Corps.
I gotta ask, how hard is it to hide from the Marine Corps?
Well, I had the time of my life. in Yellow Springs. They did come to my parents' house several times.
Looking for you.
In Lexington.
But they're looking for you.
Right.
I mean, were they not more resourceful than that? It sounds like it's not very hard at all to hide from the Marine Corps.
There were actually a lot of people that were resistors, deserters. That's why they had to get the blanket amnesty. It was a large group of people. And I believe that you came up on a list every now and then, and you were hot when you were at the top of the list, and then it circulated back, and you were less hot, and then you'd come back.
So different
they would
age,
come
though.
periodically to my parents' house.
It's hard to imagine being able to do that now, the age of the internet, and everybody kind of knowing where you are when you are. But so you were able just to basically hide for several years until it was over. So you get to California. Give me some idea how you stumble into a career in education.
Well, at Antioch College, I had a lot of friends there that went to school, and one of the people that went to school there, Peter Jacobson, he was an Antioch student. He came out here on work study with his girlfriend, and they worked at the Walden School. He was an early childhood education major. Well, that was in '71. So he came back out here in '73 and opened up a child care center in Richmond, California, on Barrett Street that offered a breakfast and a lunch. It's like a working class daycare center. I had fallen out of love, and we'd broken up with the girlfriend that I had back in Yellow Springs. And I was running out of things to do in Yellow Springs. So I came out here and worked in his child care center as a cook, making the breakfast in the morning and the lunch in the afternoon. And after cooking, I found myself, instead of doing the dishes, going out in the yard, coming in the classrooms, and hanging out with the kids and the teachers. And the more I did that, the more people kept saying, you know, you seem to like this, and the kids seem to like you, and you should pursue this.
Until that point in your life, had you had any kind of experience teaching kids or babysitting or
None.
camp counseling or anything
None.
like that?
None.
Did it ever occur to you that you had any special ability with small children?
Not at that point. I mean, when I started hanging out with kids and knew that they liked me and I liked them, and I liked the job of being with young children, then yes, I thought it would. And then I started taking classes then.
Did you ever think about why you enjoyed being with young children? What it was about the interaction that
Well, I'm a
gave
very
you
playful
pleasure?
person, you know, and kids learn through play. So that aspect appealed to me. The aspect of like kids learning, you know, trial and error learning, creative play learning, and watching kids progress and develop, that appealed to me. Also at that time, my friend went on to become the director of child care services here at UC Berkeley for a while. So I got on here at UC Berkeley doing sub work at all the different centers, Girton, Anna Head, Smythe Fernwell 1 and 2. There were 7 different centers at that time, from the infant center on up. So I sort of honed my skill there and started taking more classes. And I worked here for 5 years.
You think of it as a skill?
It's sort of like the man became the job, I guess. There is a skill.
Yeah.
I mean, you either have the magic, or you either have the inspiration, or you don't. And I've seen people that have gone to school for a long time that, in theory and in books, they're really good, but with kids, they find out that they're not.
When you watch someone who's new to teaching small children, what do you look for to see whether they're made for this or not?
To see their enjoyment level, and
If
to
they're
see
taking genuine pleasure from it.
right, and to see if they sort of have the magic to be able to get to kids and understand kids, and to interact.
How common is it to be good at it?
Well, I don't know. I've seen good, bad, and in between.
Yeah.
But when I was working here, I was still taking classes, and I took a class with Sue Britson back in 1982, child development course. And
Was Sue a fellow student, or she teaching?
She was teaching over at Contra Costa College, junior college. And she was my instructor, and she knew I was working at UC, and we became friends. And she told me that she had been at Bethel with friends, and they had broken off Bethel, and they started this new school, Step One, and they were in the Kensington Youth Hut.
Right.
And the Kensington Youth Hut's a very small place, so they wanted to expand. And as chance would have it, one of the public schools, I think that was killed by the Jarvis Gann Initiative, the Tilden Elementary, I think it was Tilden, a K through 3 up on Spruce Street.
Yep.
They were able to get a loan and buy the site there.
So you were there from the beginning. That's from the moment the Step One moved into that building.
It was one of the original.
How unusual was it then for a man to be a preschool teacher?
You know, it was still pretty unusual, and it's still unusual today.
Unusual, yeah.
But I don't know what it was with me. When I worked at Kathmandu, it was started by a man. There was another man who worked there, Greg DeFabio. And when I worked at UC, UC had men teachers, David Shattuck, Peter Jacobson, a lot of other people. So, and when I went to Step One, Eric Peterson, who became co-director, you know Eric,
yep.
He was one of the original people there too. So I was never in a place to where I was just the man, and there were a lot of just nothing but women. So I've sort of been fortunate to work at places that always have had men. And as you know now, Step One, it's almost half men.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a lot of men that work.
Do you think small children respond differently to a male teacher than a female teacher?
In different ways, yes, I think.
What do you think the male teacher can bring to the situation?
A lot more large motor. A lot more maybe creative play.
Is that right? Yeah.
I think. I don't know. It's just my opinion.
Yeah. Well, your opinion is what we're after here. So
I don't want a dissing women teacher.
You can do whatever you want now. You're retiring. Nobody can do anything to you now, Charlie. You're safe. You can speak. You can be honest. You can. So that's interesting. So you do think there's kind of a natural role for the male teacher in the environment, a complementary role.
I think all teachers need to be nurturers, and not all men are nurturers.
Right.
But some men are nurturers.
Right.
You know, and I think you have to have the right skill set and the right mindset. But then I think there should be more men in education, especially early childhood education.
So when you look back on your life,
like a balance.
Yeah, when you look back on your life, and you spent 40 years basically teaching small children. When you look back on your own childhood, can you see it might have led you to this career, experiences, predispositions, whatever it is?
Well, I come from the South, and Southern families, especially my Southern family, tend to always like babies and always like the youngest in the family. You know, they were all sort of treasured and spoiled. And so my father and mother, anytime any relative or friend had a baby or a young child, there was a lot of care and a lot of attention given to that young person and stuff. So I think I picked up some of that,
Yeah.
you know, just by osmosis or being around them, or
Absolutely.
and that paid off. But it was never anything really planned.
Does it surprise you, the career you had? Or
If you'd asked me in 1969,
yeah.
yes. If you would have asked me in 75, 76, after being in it a couple of years, probably not so surprised.
Is that right? You mean when you stumbled into it, you really felt, I found something I really want to do?
Well, like I say, the man became the job. You know, I didn't really start out, but the more I got into it, the more I wanted to get into it, and the more it felt comfortable.
Have there been any times in your career where you questioned the career, where you thought maybe I should be doing something else?
Only for the money part, but
Only for the money part, not for the job.
because it doesn't pay well. But no, the job satisfaction
was
never.
It was always high.
Never. I mean, you've been to Step One. They value their teachers there, and we're, I won't say coddled, but we're respected.
But the money part made it uncomfortable.
Well, I've always gotten by.
Yeah.
But It's not a play. It's not a career to go into if if you want to be financially independent. But I've never been financially independent, so I don't strive for it.
It's I know a lot of people who made a lot of money and who are really unhappy. And I know a lot of people who made a lot of money and actually can't say they enjoy their jobs.
That's true.
I mean, people make trades. If someone had told you that you'd done the reverse with your life when you were a kid, that you were going to make a whole lot of money but you wouldn't like what you did, would you have thought that was desirable? Or did you have it kind of in your mind all along that you should always like what you do?
Yes. Once after like the 60s hit, there were so many things that I knew I did not want to do. And there were so few things that I thought I might want to do. And they were always sort of in the more nurturing side, helping side. Like I worked in a hospital outside high school for 2 years, and I really liked that. I worked at University of Kentucky Medical Center, and I worked on the floor as a checker that would go by and check equipment, and in the afternoon I would do the narcotic auditing. And I wore a little white suit and stuff, and I really liked that, being with people that were in need, feeling that I was creating some kind of need. And you get that with children too, because children are really dependent on you. When you're there and their parents aren't there, you're the person it all falls on. The good, the bad, the ugly, the unexpected, the crazy.
Yeah.
It could all happen.
So you've had 30 years at Step One? Any idea how many kids came through your class in the 30 years?
I've tried to guesstimate it. There's like 100 and something families, right, and 5 different classrooms. And although I don't get to know every child in every classroom, I try to, at least on the yard, or I did, to make contact with. So in 30 years, let's just do 100 families instead of 125. Right. Was that 3,000? That's a lot.
How many do you think you could remember?
A lot.
A lot.
I have a pretty good memory for faces and stuff. When I go out shopping in North Berkeley or Solano, I'm more apt to run into someone I know than I'm not.
Do you see grown-ups who you taught when they were little?
Yes.
And recognize them?
Yes. As a matter of fact, Alexis Walters, the head teacher in room 3, I was her teacher when she was 3.
But it must be very odd, but you're dealing with essentially amnesiacs because these kids don't remember you.
Some do, some don't.
Really?
Some do, some don't.
It's so hard to remember. I remember very little from that time in my life. I can remember, but I certainly wouldn't remember the face or the name of the person who taught me in preschool. Mm-hmm. Is there anything odd about that, about having people for whom you're doing so much, who you suspect might not remember it?
It doesn't really bother me. They tend to more remember me than not. You have to remember I'm sort of identifiable. I'm the guy that looks like Santa, so they're more apt to remember me than, say, someone that didn't have as many identifying features.
What records have you kept of your time at Step One? Do you have pictures? Do you have?
Oh, I have lots of pictures. I have some video. The parents used to come in and do videos or CDs of a day in the life. So I have about 6 of those. I have a lot of the rosters that I've kept that Sue has. They'll be at the probably at the event that's going to happen October 19th. And just loads of pictures. Pictures every year of my small group, and pictures every year of the classroom shot, and a lot of pictures of just the total staff. We do a staff photo each year. So yeah, I have a lot of pictures, thousands.
Are there any specific memories of the 30 years? Anything that kind of stands out? If someone told you to tell me something that happened at Step One that you'll never forget.
I could tell you 100, but there was this little boy, Jack, who was a very gregarious little boy, and we had a girl in room 5 that was in our classroom, and then she went on to our Step One kindergarten. And a lot of times when they go to kindergarten, for the first 2 or 3 weeks, they'll come back in the classroom they were in before kindergarten to hang out with the teachers because they miss them a little bit or they miss group time. and we let him come back in. So it was his second year there, and the little girl comes back into music, and she just comes in, and we invite her to come over to the circle. And the little girl looks up and says, "Oh, Ava, I remember I used to play with you last year." And Jack Damon goes, "I remember I didn't." So it's just little things like that, you know, that stick with you.
How long ago would that have been?
That's about 4 or 5 years ago.
When you're, I want to go back to like what makes someone good or naturally suited to the job. I mean, it seems to me, it's amazing when you're describing your life, it's amazing to me that the Marine Corps ever thought you were going to point a gun at anybody and shoot them.
I told him I wasn't.
You told them you weren't.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
It was pretty clear.
They really didn't. They didn't work very hard to identify the people who were going to be good at that job. They just pulled you in, and you weren't. That's not what you were suited for.
I was a draftee.
Yeah, but the nurturing thing, the taking care of little kids all the time for a living. I'm curious how that bleeds into the rest of your life. When you leave work and go home or go out into the world, do you find yourself in a kind of caretaking role all the time because you're just doing that you're doing that naturally?
No, I used to try to separate myself once I went outside the gate, especially at step one, and to put all that stuff behind me, because I've known so many teachers that can't and don't, and they drive themselves half neurotic.
Is that right?
I've seen it. But
so how would you do it? What would you do? What switch would you flip in your mind?
Well, I don't understand the question exactly. I think I've just become myself and without kids. Uh-huh. I'm still playful. Uh-huh. I'm still sort of a big kid at heart. I think that helps a lot.
Yeah.
I owe some of my gratitude to Arrested Development, I guess.
All right. Well, let's talk about now. You've now got more time on your hands. You'll be at step one every now and then, but you're not doing it full time. What do you want to do?
Well, still play. You know, I recently, Susan and I had a lawn bowling demonstration, and what they were teaching us instructions. Uh-huh. So I may do that. Before my back went out, I used to play a lot of golf. Uh-huh. So I may try to get back into golf. Susan and I walk daily. I want to travel more, and when I still see kids, I look up. You know, it's just sort of a reflex thing.
Do you? You know, it's funny, this whole idea of when you said it several times, play. That one of the things that makes someone well suited to is just a talent for play. And it's interesting how when people grow up, they cease to play sometimes.
Right. It's a big mistake. They cease to sing. Yeah,
and dance. Well, they do that because their children are embarrassed when they do it. They cease to. It's something that's hard to preserve into adulthood. You have to it either comes naturally to you, or you have to think about it. Mm-hmm. You notice that in people. Mm-hmm. And I imagine that you're saying that what makes someone good at it is they still have that in them. Mm-hmm. If you were advising grown-ups how to keep that in them, well, how would you advise them to do it? How to keep the little bit of the little kid in them?
Well, I think through sports or through other pursuits that leads them to play more on their own. You know, one of the big reasons I think that I like it so much is I really like to play, and kids learn through play, and you can teach through play, and creative.
So give me an example of how you teach through play.
Well, let's say that we're learning to count. I just don't want to sit down with you and say, let's do 1, 2, 3. We may do a birthday party to where we have, I might have teddy bear counters out, and I might have 5 teddy bear counters out. And I'd say, well, we're having a birthday party here, and we're having fun, we're jumping up and down, but someone's at the door, someone has to go. So we would recount the teddy bears from 5 to 4. and we may go all the way down to 2 or 3, and then people would start to come, so we would start counting back. Well, we're playing a birthday party with the Bears,
Right.
but we're actually adding and subtracting too.
Right. So you've made up a game.
Yes, through play to do numbers.
How much of your life at Step One was about making up games?
A lot,
A lot.
especially during my group time.
Yeah.
Each group time, every day we have a group time, 20 to 25 minutes.
Uh-huh.
And through that, I try to bring in new concepts, but I also try to do it during play and humor.
Right.
Because I figure once you have the kids comfortable and you have their walls down to where they're not anxious and you get them interested in something through play or through humor, then they're open. And when they're open, they're going to suck it in more.
Yeah.
So you have to sort of get them first and bring them in. And after you bring them in, then you work your magic, or you work your curriculum or whatever you're trying to get through.
So in 30 years of doing this, you've watched 30 years of parents troop through the place. How have parents changed since you started doing this?
Well, the internet,
Yeah.
that's one thing. Basically, the parents at Step One, although there's a gamut of everyone, they're pretty informed parents, and they're pretty behind their kids. I mean, I've had some parents that are way too pushy, and I've had some parents that you sort of have to come in and say, you need to pay attention to this, or, you know, this is something that we can work on together. So I think basically they're the same. They're younger, but we usually have a pretty good pool.
So you haven't noticed any drift in parenting? Like people, you haven't noticed, I don't know, parents being more obsessively involved in their kids' early childhood development?
Well, you always have some that are overly obsessive.
But there always were. That's not new.
That's not new. I would say there's a big push for getting them ready for kindergarten. Everybody's back to wanting to know that their kids can do numbers and letters, and
there's more.
There's a little bit more expected through curriculum.
Right.
And I think that's good, but I also think that they need to keep the creative thought going and the creative play to where kids have choice and they can pursue what they like. If what they like are unit blocks, that's great. Let them do unit blocks. They're learning math.
Right.
If they're involved in Legos, let them do Legos, because that's small motor, and it's also a lot of engineering and creative design.
Right.
So find out what they do,
And
find
then
out
use
what
it,
they
and
like
use
to
it,
do.
and use it, encourage that, and use it to do other things.
And kids usually immerse themselves into something, and they do it to death for mastery, and after they've done it, they want to set it down and do something else.
Have you ever had a kid who just didn't want to do anything?
For a while, usually. I had one kid once tell me he wasn't going to get off the bench after his parents left. He was just going to, that's where he was going to stay all the time. And I said, that's okay, I'll stay close by, and if you need me, I'm right here. And you know, he got up and moved around sooner or later.
But you haven't had a kid who was unteachable.
I don't think so.
What
I've
would-
had some parents that are unteachable.
But it's an interesting thing, right? You would think that in 30 years you'd have some kid who was a vegetable, some kid who just wouldn't engage in any way. Some, you know.
We have kept several kids. It's a 2-year program at Step One. Well, if you're in the nursery school part, there's the 2-year-old program, and then you're in a mixed age classroom, usually 2 years before you go to kindergarten. We've had several cases where we've kept a kid 3 years, just because we thought that developmentally they needed another year. And you know, developmentally it could be physically, it could be emotionally, it could be socially, but whatever the case is, conferring with the director and my co-teachers, we would make that decision whether we think that kid would benefit another year at Step One before being sort of pushed
But that's
ahead.
different from having a child you just can't engage with. And it sounds like you've never had a child you haven't been able to engage
Well,
with.
we had some autistic kids,
Right.
but they've usually had shadow teachers. And that's a little difficult. We've had some high-functioning autistic kids that we did break through with a lot through music and humor.
Has there been change in the sensitivity to things like autism since you've been there, or dyslexia, or the various things that might be identified as a problem in a child's mind?
I think all those things have been identified more since I think they've always been there, but they've been identified more. And there seems to be a spike in the autism.
You think it's an actual spike in incidences of autism, or is it just a spike in in identifying it? You think the kids
I think both.
Kids
really.
are more likely to
I
be
think
more,
both.
No.
I think, especially like with Asperger's and things like that, that weren't defined 20 years ago.
What will you miss?
The kids, the magic, the day-to-day humor that kids can say, and some of the outrageous things they see and do. I'll miss the creative play that I see. You might go over here and see a kid that has the unit blocks out, and they've made like a throne, a flat-out throne with platforms, and you just go, how in the world did he do that? Or how did she create that with such great detail? And it's sort of like the magic that you see every day. And you get to see these kids for a 2-year block. So when they come in, they're ducks. They're like early 3s. Yeah. Some of them are 2.9.
Yeah.
And when they leave, after that first year, they come back, then they're automatically the older kid that's been through all this 1 year. And you get to see this block of growth and maturity. I miss that. And I miss the community at Step 1. I've gotten to know a lot of the teachers there really well. Eric and Aaron and I formed that band, Chucky Baby and the Biscuits. You probably have my CD.
I do have your CD. I can't say I spend a lot of time listening to it, but
I can't say I blame you.
But I do have your CD. Yeah. You gonna still play?
Well, we just recently played that Redwood Grove. What is it? What is that, honey? It's the Botanical Gardens over in Strawberry Canyon. Mm-hmm. We played that for 4 years. A friend that used to work here, Lyda Beardsley, was director. She's a teacher. She has a program over in Marin, and I don't know whether you know Lauren Maraca. She was a teacher at Step 1 in the kindergarten. She now works for Lyda. She asked us if we wanted to play a show over there.
So you're still going to play?
I think so, and I think we're going to do a couple of songs at the retirement party. You're going to miss it.
I'm going to miss it. I'm sorry I'm going to miss it. I'm sure I'll hear about it. Back to the kids. So what's the difference between teaching girls and teaching boys?
Girls mature a little quicker. They're fine motor, a lot of times a little more tuned. They're usually, not always, not as hyperactive and large motor oriented, and that's the difference I see. They're less apt to strike out, but they're more apt to get back at you later.
That's a very good description. All right, so looking back over this career, if you had to do it all over again, anything you'd do differently?
I don't think so. I almost didn't go to Step 1. I almost stayed at UC Berkeley because it was a nice thing. But I like Sue, and I wanted to be a part of something from the ground up. And so, no, I think I've been very fortunate and very lucky, and I wouldn't change it unless they paid more. If I could go back and make them pay more.
I have one more question. So it is interesting that you've had this career that has been incredibly fulfilling, and there's no parent who would dispute, incredibly important, that our kids benefited from your presence in their lives in ways we cannot measure, and everybody feels grateful to you. And yet it didn't pay. How do you explain that to yourself, that we have jobs that are so incredibly important that do not pay? And at the same time, flip side, we have jobs that are clearly nonsense jobs that pay fortunes. How do you get your mind around that and stay sane?
How can anyone explain that? All I know that it seems to be that early childhood education was not really, it was valued at one time and then sort of put aside. And now it's really coming back to where people see the benefits of early childhood education, and that children really do grow and mature at such rates. By the time they're 4 years old, they have most of their intellect. That you do need to get these kids at a young age and get them really engaged in what they like and their creative thought. And I'm sorry, what was the question?
No, I just how you could explain how a job could be so important and not pay. Well, whereas jobs that are
Well, I think it's been overlooked, and I think that in time, that I think, and they always talk about it, the Worthy Wage campaign, that the wages will come up, and maybe I thought through Obama that there might be money funneled in for early childhood education because of the significance and importance, but so far it hasn't been.
So basically, you haven't explained it to yourself.
And
I can understand why I haven't explained it to you. But it's an unfair question to put to you, but it's an interesting question.
Well, also though, I've been fortunate to work at UC Berkeley, which paid on the higher end, and Step One has paid on the higher end. Now that doesn't mean, when I say higher end, it just means the higher end of early childhood education wage. Right. But it's been a livable wage.
So I think we got to wrap it up, and I want to wrap it up just by thanking you. I mean, thanking you for your career, for the help you've given us in raising our children. There's a whole community that loves and respects you, and we thank you.
Thank you.